So in this video, I'm going to talk about WebSockets. Particularly, I'm going to show you a very simple application written using WebSockets. In fact, a chat application. So this application uses Python. So I'm using Python's WebSockets library. But to start off, I can and I should say that there are many WebSockets libraries available for Python as well as for other programming languages. Socket.io, for example, is a popular library for JavaScript in terms of the client side, and also you can use that for various other purposes as well. So Python has various other libraries for WebSockets. So Python Django channels is one such application, one such library, and there's this library called Flask Sockets. There's another library called Flask Socket.io. You also find a Python library called Twisted, which of course is a broader library for network application programming and so forth. So, but I found this simple library called WebSockets, which I chose to show this sample chat application because it's quite easy to understand, and my purpose on this particular video is to show you how WebSockets can be useful and to appreciate using WebSockets in your applications. You may choose to use WebSockets in different other programming languages with different other libraries, or with Python with different libraries that I mentioned, various other libraries. But use this video as a way to appreciate WebSockets and start using it. Right, so I'm using WebSockets, as you can see in this, and WebSockets itself depends on this async.io library, so you have to import that and so forth. So what exactly is happening here? So there is a main method which is calling async.io run and provides main function, which is an async definition of the main function. That's why this async.io is needed, and you have to provide an async method. And if you look at the async method, so I am not trying to teach you async.io or WebSockets itself, WebSockets library itself in this video, but if you just try to understand what's happening here, it serves a chat server, which is another async definition, which gets a WebSocket as a parameter, and I'm gonna run this in the local host on port 9876, and then it has this call called async.io future, which is an await thing, which means you can just consider that as run forever, this particular chat server method. So what exactly is happening here? So I have declared two global variables, users and user ID. So let's look at what are those. So users is simply a set, and user ID I have kept this as 0. And there is another global variable that I'm using, which is a map, which is actually a dictionary in Python. Okay, so now there is a try finally block, as you can see. A very simple application, just like 51 lines, and you have a chat application. Of course, this application doesn't do much. It doesn't persist any details in a database or does authentication or whatever. It does nothing of that sort, but it just demonstrates what a chat application skeleton might look like. And of course, when it comes to a chat application, various other functionalities will be needed to get a full-fledged application up and running. So anyhow, I use these users set to add this WebSocket client, which is when you get a no, it starts listening, the server starts listening on this port. When a client connects, it just comes and hit this method. That's what it means. And when you hit the method, and this WebSocket will be a reference to that client, and you can consider that as a client connection or whatever, something like that. So that is the parameter. So it represents a connection, which means a user, right? So let's so in this case I have added the user into this set, and I have just used the print adding WebSockets, and just use that for us to see a new WebSocket connection has been received and so forth. And I'm just using this ID field, which I'm trying to send it to the client as well, for for us to see who is sending the message and so forth in the chat application. So ID I'm incrementing, but of course in this case I'm not considering any concurrency or whatever, so no locks, no concurrency thoughts have been gone through in this sample application, but it just demonstrates the high level functionality. And in the users map, I add this user ID against the WebSocket connection variable, right? So that's why this use map dictionary is used, and so forth. So I just keep it, and then immediately once this WebSocket connection comes, I use these WebSockets libraries. You still see this squiggly yellow color line, so that's because I haven't installed WebSockets yet. I will do that in a while. So it broadcasts with these users set and the user event, which is another function. So for the user event, I pass this added user true, which is a boolean, and the user ID, which we just created in this function. So of course, if two functions concurrently comes, things can really go wrong here, but as I said, I haven't considered any of that sort in the sample application. So I have also imported this JSON thing, because I'm using JSON as the serialization mechanism to send information from server to the client, and the client also sends, I'm expecting it as a JSON. No, again, no error validation, no message format validation or anything like that happens in this sample application, but just assuming that it will get messages as expected. So when this happens, when this broadcast message is called on this user event, what happens is it just uses this method, this particular format. Type users count is sent as the current number of users available in this system up to now, and the new user is the added user, and the added users a new user, which is like, it will go as true, and ID will be sent as 1 or 2 or 3 based on the client, right? And then it waits for a new message, async for message in WebSockets. Pretty simple. You can understand that it's trying to wait, and obviously it will block at that point. And when a message comes from now this is the server side, right? So when a client sends a message, that message will be sent as a JSON. As I said, we expect it as a JSON, so I load the JSON message as event, and that JSON payload is expected to have a property called action, and if that action is a message, it's a message to be sent to other folks, other clients as well. So we use this broadcast method, which means it will broadcast to all the users who are in this in this map, because the users set has this WebSocket client, so it will be using that client handle to broadcast everything to different clients. So the message event, so the message which is sent by the client is accessed using the message property. So we expect this incoming JSON payload to have a message property as well, and so I extract that here, and that will be passed as the message, and the type is indicated as a message, not a user's type. So the message is passed in the message MSG attribute, and ID is passed like who actually used this. So user ID This is why we needed this user map, because from this WebSocket, for us to extract the user ID, which I just mapped it here from the WebSocket client handle to the user ID. So we use that and we pass that into this method, which is used here. So that will be sent over. Pretty simple. Once everything is done, simply it says removing the WebSocket, and obviously we need to remove the user from the user map. The WebSocket client handle needs to be removed, and user ID will be removed here. So from the users set also we want to remove the WebSocket, and of course this user ID is already available now because I popped it out of this user map and user ID is available. And again I'm sending this user event as a broadcast, and it says add user false. It's not a new user, it's sort of an indication that the user is no more now. And we're also sending the number of users, which will be one less when a user is closed or the client disconnects. And yes, and the user ID is reset to 0 when no one is in the room. So if that's another simple check that we are doing, like if no one is in the room, like all the clients removes or goes out, user ID is being set to 0. So when a new client joins back at that point, that user or that client will get a user ID of 1 instead. So let's have a look at how to run this server. So as you can see, I have these stuff already available. So this chat.js, I will show you this in a while when I run this, obviously, and this chat window. So this is something I'm going to open up very soon. So before we do that, so I have this application here integrated, opened in the VS Code terminal itself. So I wanted to create a virtual environment for Python. So I have already done that. So if you want to do that thing, you can create a new directory, env, or whatever that name that you want it to be. So you can do that, and then you can use Python. Of course, just check if you have Python installed, and you use the Python module venv to use it in the venv folder. So when you do this thing, a new environment will be created, and then I need to activate that environment. And to do that, I can do venv bin activate, and when you do that thing, you see the prompt changes, which is an indication that we have the server, the environment activated. Now you can try running this. Obviously it will fail because we don't have those modules installed. So Websockets module is not there, so I need to install that. I can use pip to do installation. I'll check pip is installed. Yes, it is installed. So I'm gonna install Websockets, and this should download and install Websockets. Let me try to run it again. So okay, so it looks like it's successfully running. Now is the time for us to run the browser and see a couple of browsers maybe, and see how things work. Let me open up the Firefox browser, and I'm going to open this chat window.html. So let me see what is in there. As you can see, it has this title chat windows, and then there is a text box in a div class, div tag, as you can see, and there is a paragraph saying enter text below, and then a text area is there, and then an input class says send message with a submit button, and there is an empty div element as saying chat output, and of course it brings in chat.js, which is here, which does some client calls and so forth. It does some important logic which we need to look at. So before that, let me open this and use my chat window HTML. So as you can see, you have this, and as soon as you did this, you found this message being sent over. One user in the chat room and user ID is 1. And so as you can guess, this was sent by the server. So let's quickly have a look at our chat.js. So chat.js has this windows.add event listener DOM content loaded. So when the DOM content is loaded, this particular method gets fired. And as you can see, 9876 is our port which I'm connecting over the WebSocket scheme. So this WebSocket thing is now this is basically JavaScript, right? So you create a WebSocket client, and then I'm using this send message query selector, and I'm adding an add event listener. So what is this send message? Send message is this, and I'm adding an event listener for that on the click event. So when the click button is pressed, so I am using WebSocket send. Here you go. So you have this JSON stringify method being called with action message, and the message with the message text which is here being taken over and passed in. Its value is taken over and passed in. And then document get element by ID and message text value. So after clicking the button over here on the this thing, it is wiped off. So that's what it means. So let me go back and then on message. So WebSocket on message. So it waits for a message, and when the message comes back, obviously when you send a message, the server response as we already looked at. So what happens? It sends a JSON response, right? So it sends a JSON response. Even when the connection was established, it sent a JSON response, as you can remember. So that's why you see this line when you initiated a connection and so forth. Okay, so we'll come back to that. So let's look at this logic once more. So we pass the data that came from the server, and it's there in the event. And then in the document, I create an element called UL, which is a listed element. And then another li element is being created, and then the current date is taken over, and the display message. So and the event type, if event type is users, as you can see, users event type was sent here for a new user being added, or when a user was removed or disconnected. So when that happens, we count the event count user. If the count is 1, we add an empty, otherwise we add an S to just pluralize the user phrase. If it's 1, it will be displayed as 1 user, otherwise 2 users. So that's why it is there. And the event will have the count, because you see the count is this. So that's sent over. And if it's the new user, which means a new user joined, so we concat this display message which says the current dates string, user with user ID, which is for the first person, it will be user number 1, and then the event message, if there is any. Oh no, so in this it's a message case, otherwise it will just display this. So current string, a new user joined, and then display message will concat the users. So it will say a new user joined, 1 user in the chat room, user ID will be 1. So that's exactly what you see here. The date, a new user joined, 1 user in the chat room, user ID 1, and so forth. Okay, so that's when a new user is joined. So otherwise, when the user is left, which will be the case if this is false, it will say user is left and the remaining number of users in the chat room and so forth. And otherwise, now the type is used to think of this. And then what we do is, now this display message, I create a text node with its content, and message is an element here, and that is added, this content is added to that, and then this message is added to the message element, this which we just created. And then the messages is all the messages which is under this being added, and then finally these messages needed to be added to our chat output. So that's exactly what is happening there. And let's see it in action. So everything is clear, and when a message, the real chat message comes, the message is being printed as well. So let's do this. So in the same client, I'm going to use another connection. So let's do this. So see, now it says a new user added 2 users in the chat room. Now if you go back to the first client, it also has this because it broadcasted, right? And now let's say I'm going to type hi folks. Hi folks. It just, you got the user 1 responded or sent hi folks, as you can see. Hi everyone in the room. So he sends a message, and there you go, you got, everyone gets that message. So let me now go create a new client in this browser window. So let me use this. There you go, user ID 3, the 3rd client joined, and let me also use a 4th client here. 4th client. Hi, I just joined. So you should have it here. I just joined. I just joined. I just joined. And let me remove this now. When this happens, 3 users in the room. So user ID 2 left. Okay. Seems like user 2 left. Right? So that message should be visible here. 2 left, 2 left. I'm going to remove that. 2 users in the room, user ID 4 is left now. 2 users in the chat room. And I'm going to remove that also. And there's going to be only 1 left. So now all gone. Right? So this is basically the logic that I have implemented in this chat application. And now you can see how useful this WebSocket based methodology. If this was implemented using conventional HTTP or some other methods, this would have been immensely difficult to implement. So this is one of the advantages of using WebSockets, and that's why I think WebSockets is going to prevail for a very long time, as I foresee. So I'll see you in another post. Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to my channel for you to see more videos like this. Thank you very much.